Good report?
Yeah, it's actually very clean numbers. I think the things that sticks out most is capital expenditure is not going to go up. I think people are worried about a lot of these cloud providers adding to capex, so that's a good thing. With revenue slightly higher, capex remaining flat, the backlog is growing. So I think this is a good print from multiple facets.
So, I mean, we look at a stock that's down, about 23% so far this year. Many would say that maybe the company needed some good news. The bar seemed like it was pretty low heading into this report.
I think the big thing for us on the call is that just now, OpenAI did a very big deal with AWS. AWS is investing in OpenAI. How does that change the relationship between OpenAI and Oracle? Because that is the mega deal of all kinds, is the Stargate project between OpenAI and Oracle. I think that is one thing that I would want to know more when we get on the conference call.
Do you think it does change or has to change or no?
Well, the thing is, OpenAI has made very large commitments of spending across everybody.
Yeah.
Now, we'll see how that shapes up over the next few years. So it's possible that none of that changes, but we want to make sure that the Oracle management comes out and says it categorically that there is no change in that arrangement. There is some, reports, Brody reported that there is some issue with the Abilene, Texas data center expansion.
Right.
The question is what happens there. So that's going to be another thing we want to learn on the conference call.
Well, I'm glad you went there because I felt like there was a bunch of stories from Brody Ford and team about Oracle and OpenAI ending that plan to expand that flagship data center. And then you had Oracle planning thousands of job cuts in the face of an AI cash crunch. How do you put those together with this?
See, the thousands of job cuts.
Is Oracle in trouble?
No,
Okay.
not at all. The thousands of job cuts is just the question of, concept of rationalizing of the cost structure. It happens a lot in software, frankly. When you are growing top line this much, you may not need that same amount of, salespeople, marketing people, R&D people. I get that. And especially when AI revenue comes with a lower margin right now.
Yeah.
Over time, the margin improves. So when you have a company like Oracle with very high margin revenue base, you mix high growth revenue with lower margin, the net effect is your overall margin gets impacted. One way to offset is you take care of tight your operating expenses. Microsoft has been doing it for many, many years as well. So this is no different in our case.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds as like there's not as much of a fundamentals issue. I'm curious, how much of it's fundamentals versus how much of it is people being a bit sour on, the artificial intelligence software space this year?
Yeah, but this is more on the AI infrastructure side.
Right.
So very different than the SaaS issue that we are facing. But for Oracle and all the others, whether that's Microsoft, Amazon, the question is, for how long will that big demand for AI infrastructure remain? Right now, for everything that we are seeing, the demand is very high. And in the case of Oracle, it is a little more specific tied to OpenAI than it is for some of the other vendors. So the big question is whether OpenAI can afford to spend at that rate. So they have had made arrangements of over $300 billion just with Oracle alone.
Which is tremendous.
Yeah, $250 billion with Microsoft.
Yeah.
And then a new contract with AWS. So for a company that size where the revenue run rate is, let's say, 25 billion or somewhere in that range, how can they spend that much? And that's, I think, the biggest question of them all when it relates to all these companies.
Does the jump in those stocks, again, up about 7.5%, that makes sense in terms of coming off of these numbers?
Yeah, because CapEx is not going up.
Yeah.
They're saying whatever the next raise of RPO increase that they're seeing or the backlog, they're going to fund it from either prepayments or another way. So they're not going to raise their CapEx numbers. I think that's the big difference here.
I think it's fascinating, though, too, Anurag, that I feel like some of the AI conversation is evolving, thinking beyond the large language models and the build out of these. Is it right? Are you seeing that too? And I do wonder what it means for the spend. Does that have to continue still at the pace that we've seen?
So when you look at these 3-4 vendors, whether it's CoreWeave, Oracle, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they are providing the token factory or the base infrastructure for people to build applications. And each one has its own story that goes in tandem with what their long-term strategy is. For Oracle, the OpenAI contract is a big piece of it, frankly. And I think that's where we want to focus on and say, how is that relationship going to evolve over the next few years?
So, it's not uncommon that sometimes we'll see this post-market rally and then in the morning you come in and for some reason we're declining, right? What do you think investors will really be looking at that you think will be consequential as we kind of think about sentiment heading into tomorrow? Is there anything that stands out to you maybe from this report or areas that investors may be really critiquing?
Yeah, I talked about the first one, the OpenAI relationship.
Yeah,
right.
The second one is what is the internal rate of return for a lot of the contracts that they're signing right now?
Yeah.
Is it something that is going to be accretive in the near term, or is it going to be multiple years out? So that's the second piece of the equation. And the third is funding. As far as this year is concerned, calendar 2026, they've already talked about funding, in the tune of $45 to $50 billion, both from debt and equity. The question is, what happens next year? When you're going to realize the next big backlog next year, how much of that capex is going to go up? And how are you going to fund that capex? So those are the three things that I think is going to stand out on the call today, which will dictate the stock tomorrow morning.
I mean, the OpenAI is just fascinating, right? Great to be kind of have that exposure and that relationship, but it also puts you at risk, right? You're vulnerable if that customer backs off at all.
Yeah, but Oracle can say the same thing. Well, Microsoft has the same situation, frankly, because Microsoft is dependent on OpenAI's technology for their products. It is highly dependent on the flow through of the hosting of the app and so forth. So I think OpenAI is an important part of the overall ecosystem. But the question is, can they afford to spend at that same rate for multiple years to come?
How are you thinking about Oracle as it stacks up against some of its peers right now?
So 4 or 5 years ago, they were not in the game at all when it comes to AI infrastructure. It was basically Amazon number one, Microsoft number two, then Google, and then, a fight is there. But because of OpenAI, these guys are going up quite a bit, and, they're gonna have hundreds of billions of revenue just on cloud in the next several years if nothing goes wrong, and that puts them actually, it could be very close to Google or even above Google, depending on where they are.
All right, so going back to the call, if they say something about OpenAI, that would be troublesome. What else?
Well, the thing is, it's a question of whether they say, well, we're going to raise our capex quite a bit next year. Not this year, because they've already disclosed that. I think those are the things that we will be looking for.